Valve. Think of all of the great games that Valve has produced over the years. The Half-Life games, the Portal games, the Left 4 Dead's, Team Fortress, those other ones that people also like quite a lot. If you play games on PC, you should know who Valve are. You more than likely have a Steam account. It's also more than likely filled with games that you love and games that you haven't actually played yet, but we'll probably get around to them one day. However, the Valve that we once knew is gone. Valve does not really release games anymore, they merely sell them. Now, I'm not trying to imply that Valve is by any means in trouble as a company. If their reported $4.3 billion revenue haul from Steam in 2017 is anything to go by, they're doing oh so fine in the profits department. What I'm implying is that they are no longer the Valve that so many loved. The Valve that released classic titles that were ahead of their time and that have lived on many years since their release. The Valve that wasn't simply a money-making machine. What I'd like to discuss is Valve's downfall as a game developer.
How long before these
Steam sales
kill us?
There, let's see. We all use
Steam.
let's say 6 times a day, times 4 years, minus we're not
Steam.
3 days. Yes, we all have 3 days to live.
What?
Firstly, let's talk about how Valve came about and a bit of history. Gabe Newell, tired of making millions of dollars working at Microsoft, decided he and his colleague Mike Harrington would move on to a new industry: video games. After passing over a few horrible name choices, they eventually settled on a slightly less horrible Valve, and the company was formed on August 24, 1996. Valve's first release was Half-Life, and straight away they made their mark. This game won over 50 PC Game of the Year awards and had sold almost 1 million copies within 6 months of release. It's pretty well regarded as one of, if not the most influential first-person shooter of all time, and it was simply the beginning of the legacy that Valve created. Shortly after, they acquired TF Software, who made a mod for Quake which eventually became the original Team Fortress game. They then also acquired the Half-Life mod Counter-Strike and hired its developers to turn it into a standalone game. Eventually, Mike Harrington left the company and they moved their headquarters to Bellevue in Washington before releasing some of their most popular titles, Half-Life 2 and Team Fortress 2. Take special note of this one because we're going to be coming back to it specifically. Before the release of either of these games, however, was the release of Steam. Initially, it was simply a platform for Valve games with the purpose of distributing them and rolling out patches for them, though eventually third-party games would arrive to the scene. This, arguably, was the beginning of Valve's realization of just how much money there was to make off of a distribution platform like this. Further down the track, they would release the Portal games, which were worked on by students that were hired specifically for these projects, and are some of Valve's best work in regards to the writing and concepts associated with them. They also published the Left 4 Dead games that were technically developed by Turtle Rock Studios, though they were a subsidiary of Valve known as Valve South at the time. These games are also a hell of a lot of fun with a really cool and interesting surrounding world and lore, and are a staple of any respectable Steam library. Since then, they haven't done a whole lot. They've obviously released Counter-Strike Global Offensive and Dota 2, currently their 2 most popular games, and they're simply going along pulling in massive amounts of money from game sales on Steam. Steam has come a long way from the rather janky-ass mess it was in the early 2000s. By 2013, it was estimated to have 75% of the market space of digital PC game distribution, and by now has over 1 billion registered accounts with 90 million active monthly users. To say that Valve makes a shitload of money from Steam would be an understatement. It's more like an absolute fuckload of money. And when you're already making an absolute fuckload of money from selling other people's games, you wouldn't really need to be developing your own titles, would you? But that's not the only thing that Valve rakes in plenty of cash from. A few of their multiplayer games are still extremely popular, and are still making lots of money from in-game purchases and the Steam community market associated with them. Now, I know that this video is supposed to be about Valve's downfall as a game developer, but I'm about to gush about how much I love Team Fortress 2 and everything that came along with it for just a moment, so best prepare yourself. Team Fortress 2 is Valve's best game. That's what I believe personally anyway. It is an incredibly enjoyable, humorous, and timeless game, which is backed up by the swath of people who still play it. It's insane. How many other FPS games from 2007 still have this many people active? Not only is the game itself incredible, but the way that Valve marketed this game was also one of the best video game marketing strategies pretty much ever. Legitimately, I heard the big Russian man tell me that it cost $400,000 to fire his weapon for 12 seconds, and that was all I needed to hear. I bought TF2. Oh wait, no I didn't, because this masterpiece is fucking free. Seriously, this game is my favorite shooter game without a doubt, one of my most favorite games of all time. If you haven't seen my video about it, you should. And though I believe that Team Fortress 2 is not only the best game that Valve has made, but also the best brand and universe that they have designed, I believe that it was one of the catalysts for their downfall. Loot boxes. Or as they were known back in the day, Manco supply crates. The idea was simple. Players received crates as a random drop and they could spend $2.50 on a key to open the crate in order to get one of the possible rewards or have a 1% chance to get an exceedingly rare item. And what did people do? They started opening the shit out of those crates. And I'm guilty of spending a fair amount of money on this game. I even unboxed my own Unusual back in the day and eventually sold it on the community market in order to buy DLC for Europa Universalis 4, and honestly, Paradox's DLC policy could have an entire video essay written about it as well. But I digress. Despite this being added to Team Fortress 2 in 2010, the concept never really took off massively until they implemented it into Counter-Strike Global Offensive, which would not only create a massive online economy, but also a number of gambling schemes and scams regarding expensive in-game items. Most importantly, however, when this loot box economy was ported to CSGO, which was objectively the far more popular game, Valve started to make absolute bank off it. And what did the rest of the games industry do? They all took in what Valve was doing and thought, well, that's a fucking good idea. Now, I'm not saying that the loot box fiasco that overran the games industry a few years back was Valve's fault. Nah, actually, that is what I'm saying. It was Valve's fault completely. Since the Arms deal update added skins and loot boxes to CSGO in 2013, Valve has released 4 games. For one of them, they just collaborated with a bunch of crack addicts on a terrible Counter-Strike mod, another is just the Japanese Left 4 Dead arcade game, which again was just a collaboration, another is just a mediocre free-to-play VR game, and the other is just fucking Hearthstone except it's Dota. They have done basically nothing since the CSGO skin update, and to be perfectly fair to them, they don't need to. When you're pulling in an initial 30% cut of the sales of basically every game on your platform on top of the money that you're already pulling in from the Steam community marketplace and item trading, why the hell would you bother putting all of the time, resources and effort into making games? They set a standard that many other game developers have followed. It's more profitable to add microtransactions and loot boxes and to perpetuate a virtual economy than to just keep making more games, regardless of whether or not it's just cosmetic. Like I said at the start of the video, Valve are far from being in trouble financially, and it's this comfortable space that they've found themselves in that has encouraged their lack of, well, game development. Just like any other multi-billion-dollar industry, money talks. And unfortunately, it means that sometimes, a Valve employee walks. Former Valve writers such as MacLeod, most notable for writing both Half-Life 1 and 2, and Chet Falazek, who worked on Half-Life 2 and the 2 episodes that followed, have left the company. And while Eric Walpole still kinda works for Valve again, he's no longer a full-time employee. With writers responsible for such works as the Portal games no longer working for them, it's hard to believe that we'll really ever see anything like them again. Which is a massive, massive shame. One of the things that Valve games did best was tell an interesting story and have the interesting lore surrounding the gameplay. Not to gush about Team Fortress 2 again, but the cinematics and comics made for it make me love the game so much more. And knowing that the likelihood is that we'll never see anything like this come from Valve ever again, is what really hurts the most. So it looks like Valve is destined to continue on as a money factory, and with the revenue that it pulls in from Steam and everything associated with it, it's hard to see why they wouldn't just keep doing so. However, things aren't as smooth for our cashed up friends as they have always been. Steam no longer has as much of a monopoly on the digital market as it used to, now with Epic Games leading developers away from them and other platforms such as Good Old Games gaining more traction, all of which I'm sure is keeping Gabe on his toes. Maybe it's not all over. Maybe Valve will be forced to once again show just how competent a game developer they are and blow us all out of the water with a sequel to one of their beloved franchises, or perhaps a new IP entirely. If their past releases are anything to go by, then they'd surely impress. The chances of this happening, however, are slim. No matter how hard Epic Games are knocking on the door, with many of their veteran writers no longer with the company and their overall shift towards maintaining a low-risk yet profitable business model, I highly doubt we are ever going to see another substantial release from Valve. That means no more Half-Lives, no more Portals, no more incredible games with seriously entertaining media and extras that come along with them. At least not from Valve anyway. You know what? Maybe it's a good thing that Valve will never make another Team Fortress, or Portal, or Half-Life, or Left 4 Dead. Maybe it helps us to cherish these titles more, to understand how important many of them were for the games industry. You know the old saying, you either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain. Well, Valve didn't exactly die a hero. And as it stands, they live on as the villain.